The morning sun cast long shadows across the deck of the USS Constellation as Lieutenant Sarah Chen made her final rounds. Her footsteps echoed against the metal flooring, each step deliberate and measured, as if she was trying to memorize every detail of the massive aircraft carrier that had been her home for the past 18 months. The salt air whipped through her dark hair as she paused at the rail, watching the endless expanse of Pacific Ocean stretch toward the horizon. Sarah had always been different from her fellow officers. While others saw naval service as duty or career advancement, she viewed it as a calling to protect something greater than herself. Her intelligence reports had consistently been among the most accurate in the fleet, her analysis sharp and insightful. But today, everything felt different. Today, she was leaving. The decision hadn't come easily. 3 weeks ago, she had uncovered something that made her stomach turn. Hidden within routine communications intercepts, she had discovered evidence of unauthorized weapons testing being conducted by a rogue faction within naval intelligence. The tests weren't just dangerous, they were potentially catastrophic, involving experimental sonar technology that could permanently damage marine ecosystems across vast areas of ocean. Sarah had followed protocol initially, reporting her findings to her immediate superior, Commander Hayes. But Hayes had brushed aside her concerns, telling her to focus on her assigned duties and stop looking for problems where none existed. When she pressed further, providing detailed documentation of the illegal activities, Hayes had become hostile, suggesting that perhaps Sarah wasn't cut out for the pressures of naval intelligence work. Undeterred, Sarah had taken her evidence to the next level of command. Captain Morrison had listened politely, nodding at appropriate moments, but his response had been even more chilling than Hayes's dismissal. Morrison had calmly explained that certain operations required compartmentalized knowledge, that junior officers weren't always privy to the bigger picture, and that questioning authorized activities could be considered insubordination. But Sarah knew what she had seen. The documents were clear, the communications unmistakable. A secret facility was conducting weapons tests that violated international maritime law, environmental protection treaties, and basic human decency. The experimental sonar arrays were being tested in feeding grounds for endangered whale populations, areas that should have been completely off-limits to military activities. Her conscience wouldn't allow her to remain silent, but her attempts to work within the system had been systematically shut down. Each report she filed seemed to disappear into a bureaucratic black hole. Each meeting with superior officers ended with subtle threats about her career prospects and reminders about the importance of following orders without question. The breaking point had come during a briefing where Commander Hayes had casually mentioned that the special project Sarah had been asking about was proceeding ahead of schedule. He had looked directly at her while saying it, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth, as if daring her to challenge him again. In that moment, Sarah realized that not only was her command structure aware of the illegal activities, they were actively protecting them. That night, alone in her quarters, Sarah had made the most difficult decision of her career. She couldn't stop the illegal testing from within the system, but she couldn't remain complicit in it either. She would have to find another way, even if it meant sacrificing everything she had worked for. The process of requesting early discharge had been surprisingly smooth, almost as if her superiors were relieved to see her go. They had accepted her stated reasons of family obligations and personal health concerns without question, processing her paperwork with unusual efficiency. Sarah suspected they were happy to remove a potential troublemaker from their ranks. But what her commanding officers didn't know was that Sarah had spent her final weeks on the carrier carefully documenting everything she could about the illegal testing program. She had memorized frequencies, copied transmission logs, and noted the timing of suspicious communications. She couldn't take physical evidence with her, but she could take her knowledge and her determination to see justice done. As she prepared for her departure ceremony, Sarah thought about the friends she was leaving behind. Lieutenant Rodriguez from engineering, who had shared countless late-night conversations about their hopes for their naval careers. Petty Officer Williams from Communications, who had taught her to read between the lines of encrypted messages. Chief Martinez from Intelligence, who had mentored her in the art of pattern recognition and strategic analysis. None of them knew why she was really leaving. She had maintained the fiction about family obligations and health concerns, not wanting to put them in the difficult position of knowing information that could endanger their own careers. But she hoped that someday they would understand that her departure had been about something larger than personal ambition or comfort. The departure ceremony was brief and formal. Captain Morrison presented her with the standard commendations and spoke the expected words about her service to country and dedication to duty. Sarah accepted the honors graciously, knowing that within hours she would be working to expose the very system that was now celebrating her contributions. As the helicopter lifted off from the carrier's deck, Sarah looked down at the massive ship growing smaller beneath her. Somewhere in those steel corridors, illegal activities were continuing, protected by a wall of military hierarchy and institutional loyalty. But she was no longer bound by that hierarchy. She was free to act according to her conscience, regardless of the consequences. The helicopter banked toward the horizon, carrying Sarah toward an uncertain future. Behind her, the USS Constellation continued its patrol, its crew unaware that one of their former officers was about to set in motion events that would shake the very foundations of naval command structure. In her small bag, Sarah carried more than personal belongings. She carried the hope that truth and justice could still prevail, even against overwhelming odds. Unknown to Sarah, her departure had not gone unnoticed by everyone on the carrier. Deep in the ship's communications center, a young petty officer named Jackson had been monitoring transmissions related to the illegal testing program. He had noticed Sarah's persistent questions, her attempts to gather information, and her sudden departure. Unlike the senior officers who were relieved to see her go, Jackson understood that Sarah's departure might signal something much more significant than a simple career change. As the helicopter disappeared into the distance, Jackson made a decision that would soon put him at the center of one of the most dramatic incidents in modern naval history. He began to gather his own evidence, preparing for the day when someone like Sarah might need allies within the system she had been forced to abandon. 3 months after Sarah's departure, the USS Constellation received new orders that sent ripples of concern through its crew. They were to proceed to a classified location in the North Pacific and provide support for what was described as Advanced Naval Research Operations. The coordinates placed them directly over some of the most pristine marine sanctuary areas in the Pacific Ocean. Captain Morrison briefed his senior staff on their mission, emphasizing the classified nature of their assignment and the importance of maintaining strict operational security. The research they would be supporting, he explained, was vital to national security and required absolute discretion from every member of the crew. But as the Constellation approached the designated coordinates, strange things began to happen. Unusual sonar signatures appeared on their instruments, sounds that didn't match any known marine life or geological activity. The ship's marine biologist, Dr. Elena Vasquez, became increasingly agitated as she analyzed the acoustic data coming from the research facility they were supporting. Dr. Vasquez had joined the Constellation's crew 6 months earlier as part of a new program to integrate environmental monitoring into naval operations. Her background in marine acoustics made her uniquely qualified to assess the impact of naval activities on ocean ecosystems. What she was seeing in the data from the research facility horrified her. The experimental sonar arrays were generating acoustic pulses at frequencies and intensities that could cause massive damage to marine life. Whales, dolphins, and other marine mammals relied on echolocation and acoustic communication for survival. The weapons testing was essentially creating acoustic dead zones in the ocean, areas where marine life would become disoriented, injured, or killed. Dr. Vasquez had tried to discuss her concerns with Captain Morrison, but he had cut her off before she could present her evidence. He reminded her that her role was to monitor the constellation's environmental impact, not to question authorized research operations being conducted by other units. When she persisted, mentioning the potential violations of international environmental agreements, Morrison had suggested that perhaps she wasn't suited for naval service. The situation became more complicated when Dr. Vasquez discovered that the research facility was using the constellation's own sonar arrays as part of their testing network. The ship was unknowingly participating in the illegal experiments, its powerful sonar systems synchronized with the secret weapons to amplify their destructive effects. Meanwhile, 200 miles away, the nuclear submarine USS Hampton was conducting its own patrol mission when its sonar operator detected the unusual acoustic activity. Lieutenant Commander Thomas Burke, the Hampton's commanding officer, was a 30-year veteran of submarine warfare with an impeccable record of following orders and maintaining operational discipline. Burke had built his career on precision, reliability, and unwavering loyalty to the chain of command. His submarine had earned numerous commendations for successful missions, and he was widely respected throughout the submarine fleet for his tactical expertise and steady leadership under pressure. But as the Hampton's sonar array picked up the acoustic signatures from the research facility, Burke found himself facing a situation that challenged everything he believed about military service and moral responsibility. His sonar operator, Chief Petty Officer Maria Santos, was one of the most experienced acoustic technicians in the fleet. When she reported that the sounds they were detecting matched patterns associated with illegal weapons testing, Burke initially dismissed her concerns. However, as they continued monitoring the transmissions, the evidence became impossible to ignore. The acoustic patterns were consistent with experimental sonar weapons that had been banned under international treaty. More disturbing, the testing was taking place in protected marine sanctuary areas during critical breeding seasons for several endangered whale species. Chief Santos had served under Burke for 3 years, and he trusted her judgment implicitly. When she showed him the analysis of the acoustic data, comparing it to classified reports about weapons systems that were supposed to have been discontinued years earlier, Burke realized they were witnessing something that went far beyond their normal operational parameters. The Hampton had received routine orders to maintain radio silence during their current patrol, but Burke found himself questioning whether those orders might be connected to the illegal testing they were observing. Someone in the command structure wanted to ensure that there were no witnesses to what was happening in the research area. As Burke wrestled with his conscience, he received an encrypted message that changed everything. The transmission came through back-channel communications networks used by naval intelligence, but the content was unlike anything he had seen before. It was from Sarah Chen. Sarah had spent the months since her departure from the Constellation working tirelessly to build a case against the illegal weapons testing program. She had reached out to environmental organizations, international maritime law experts, and journalists who specialized in military affairs. But every avenue she pursued seemed to hit a wall of official denials and institutional stonewalling. Her breakthrough had come through an unexpected source. Petty Officer Jackson, the communications specialist who had noticed her departure from the Constellation, had been secretly documenting the illegal testing program. Using secure communication protocols, he had been able to contact Sarah and provide her with real-time intelligence about the testing operations. Jackson's information had allowed Sarah to predict exactly when and where the next phase of weapons testing would occur. She knew that the USS Constellation would be providing support, and she knew that other naval vessels in the area might witness the illegal activities. Her message to Burke contained precise details about the testing program, along with evidence that it was being conducted without proper authorization and in violation of multiple international agreements. The message also contained something else that shocked Burke to his core. Sarah had uncovered evidence that the weapons testing program was not just illegal, it was being conducted by a rogue faction within naval intelligence that had been operating independently of normal command oversight. The program had been funded through black budget allocations and hidden from congressional oversight committees. Burke realized that his orders to maintain radio silence weren't just routine operational security measures. They were designed to prevent him from reporting what he might observe during the testing operations. Someone in the command structure knew that the testing was illegal and wanted to ensure that no one could provide testimony about what they had witnessed. As the Hampton continued its patrol, Burke watched his sonar displays show the systematic destruction of one of the ocean's most important marine habitats. The experimental weapons were creating acoustic chaos that was driving marine mammals from their traditional feeding and breeding grounds. The environmental damage was catastrophic and potentially permanent. Burke found himself at the most difficult crossroads of his career. His orders were clear: maintain radio silence and continue patrol operations. But his conscience was equally clear. The illegal testing had to be stopped, regardless of the consequences for his career. The decision became even more urgent when Chief Santos reported that the acoustic weapons testing was intensifying. The experimental arrays were being pushed to higher power levels, creating acoustic pulses that could be heard hundreds of miles away. The marine life casualties were mounting, and the environmental damage was spreading far beyond the immediate testing area. That night, alone in his quarters, Burke made a decision that would define the rest of his life. He would break radio silence and report what the Hampton was observing. He would risk his career, his reputation, and possibly his freedom to prevent further environmental destruction and to expose the illegal activities being conducted in the name of national security. But Burke knew that simply filing a report through normal channels would accomplish nothing. The same institutional protection that had silenced Sarah's concerns would bury his report as well. He would need to take more dramatic action, something that would force the issue into the open and make it impossible for the command structure to ignore or suppress. As he prepared his plan, Burke thought about the oath he had taken when he first received his commission. He had sworn to protect and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Sometimes, he realized, the greatest enemies were those who hid behind the flag while betraying everything it represented. At 0347 hours on a Tuesday morning in the North Pacific, Lieutenant Commander Thomas Burke made the decision that would be remembered as one of the most controversial acts of defiance in modern naval history. The USS Hampton, running silent at a depth of 200 feet, suddenly broke from its assigned patrol route and headed directly toward the coordinates where the illegal weapons testing was taking place. Burke's plan was audacious in its simplicity. He would position the Hampton directly in the path of the experimental sonar weapons, making it impossible for the testing to continue without risking a nuclear submarine and its crew. The act would force the entire operation into the open and create a situation that couldn't be covered up or explained away. Chief Petty Officer Santos initially questioned the course change, assuming it was related to new orders that hadn't been shared with the crew. When Burke explained what they were going to do and why, the control room fell silent. Every man present understood the magnitude of what their captain was proposing. Burke gathered his senior staff in the submarine's small wardroom and laid out the evidence that Sarah had provided, along with their own observations of the illegal testing. He explained that they had a moral obligation that transcended their military orders, a duty to prevent environmental catastrophe and expose criminal activity regardless of who was responsible. The crew's response surprised even Burke. Rather than objecting to his plan or requesting transfers to avoid involvement, his officers unanimously supported his decision. Chief Santos spoke for the group when she said that they had all sworn oaths to protect and defend, and that those oaths meant nothing if they stood by while illegal activities were conducted in their names. As the Hampton approached the testing area, Burke broke radio silence for the first time in 2 weeks. His transmission was brief and direct. USS Hampton to Fleet Command. We are observing illegal weapons testing in protected marine sanctuary, requesting immediate cessation of all testing activities and investigation of unauthorized operations. The response came within minutes, and it was explosive. Fleet Command ordered the Hampton to immediately withdraw from the area and resume its assigned patrol route. When Burke refused, citing his obligation to prevent illegal activities, the tone of the communications became increasingly threatening. Admiral Richardson, the fleet commander, personally contacted the Hampton and ordered Burke to stand down. When Burke calmly explained the evidence they had gathered about the illegal testing program, Richardson claimed that all activities in the area were fully authorized and that Burke was interfering with classified national security operations. But Burke had anticipated this response. Sarah's intelligence had included information about the rogue nature of the testing program, including evidence that it was being conducted without proper authorization from legitimate command structures. Burke knew that Richardson's claims of authorization were false. The standoff escalated when the USS Constellation received orders to intercept the Hampton and force it to withdraw from the testing area. Captain Morrison found himself in the uncomfortable position of using his aircraft carrier to threaten a friendly submarine, whose only crime was exposing illegal activities that his own ship was supporting. Dr. Vasquez watched the confrontation unfold from the Constellation's bridge, finally understanding why her environmental concerns had been so aggressively dismissed. The ship she served on was not just supporting illegal weapons testing, it was actively protecting the program from exposure. As the tension mounted, Burke made his next move. He transmitted all of the evidence about the illegal testing program on multiple frequencies, ensuring that it would be received by other naval vessels in the area, as well as by monitoring stations around the Pacific. The cat was now fully out of the bag. The transmission included Sarah's original intelligence reports, the acoustic analysis compiled by Chief Santos, and real-time sonar recordings of the environmental damage being caused by the experimental weapons. Burke also included evidence of the institutional cover-up, including records of how reports about the illegal testing had been suppressed and how personnel who raised concerns had been silenced or transferred. Meanwhile, Sarah was monitoring naval communications from her position at an environmental monitoring station in California. When she heard Burke's transmissions, she knew that her months of investigation and risk-taking had finally borne fruit. Someone with the courage and authority to act had taken up the cause she had been forced to abandon. Sarah immediately contacted the journalists and environmental organizations she had been working with, providing them with the real-time evidence of both the illegal testing and the military's attempt to suppress exposure of the program. Within hours, the story was breaking on news outlets around the world. The political ramifications were immediate and severe. Congressional oversight committees demanded emergency hearings. International environmental organizations filed formal complaints with the United Nations. Allied nations began questioning their intelligence sharing agreements with a military that conducted illegal environmental warfare, but the immediate crisis remained unresolved. The Hampton was still positioned in the testing area, refusing orders to withdraw. The Constellation was maintaining a defensive posture, unsure how to proceed against a friendly vessel whose actions were technically mutinous but morally justified. Admiral Richardson found himself caught between competing pressures. His superiors were demanding that he resolve the situation quickly and quietly, but Burke's public transmission of evidence had made a quiet resolution impossible. Any action taken against the Hampton would now be scrutinized by congressional investigators and international observers. The breaking point came when Chief Santos detected the acoustic signature of the experimental weapons powering up for another test sequence. Despite the Hampton's presence in the area, the testing facility was apparently preparing to continue its operations. Burke realized that the rogue faction responsible for the illegal testing was willing to risk a confrontation with a nuclear submarine rather than shut down their program. Burke's response was swift and decisive. He ordered the Hampton to surface directly above the testing facility and activate its emergency beacon. The signal would be detected by every naval vessel and monitoring station in the Pacific, creating an international incident that would make further cover-up attempts impossible. As the Hampton broke the surface, its crew could see the constellation on the horizon, its flight deck active with aircraft, preparing for potential military action. The standoff had reached a point where American naval vessels were potentially preparing to take hostile action against each other over the exposure of illegal activities. The resolution came from an unexpected source. Petty Officer Jackson, who had been monitoring the situation from the Constellation's communications center, made a decision that would end his military career but save both ships from a potentially catastrophic confrontation. Jackson accessed the Constellation's main communication array and transmitted a complete record of all communications related to the illegal testing program, including orders that had been issued to suppress investigation and evidence of the cover-up that extended to the highest levels of naval command. His transmission provided undeniable proof that Burke's actions were justified and that the testing program was indeed illegal. Within hours of Jackson's transmission, orders came directly from the Secretary of Defense to cease all testing activities immediately and to stand down all vessels involved in the confrontation. Congressional investigators were already en route to interview all personnel involved, and international observers were being granted access to assess the environmental damage. Burke and his crew were placed under arrest pending a full investigation, but their detention was brief. When the scope of the illegal testing program became clear, along with evidence of the institutional cover-up, the charges against the Hampton's crew were dropped. Instead, investigations were launched into the rogue faction that had conducted the illegal testing and the command structure that had protected them. Sarah was called to testify before congressional committees and international tribunals about her discoveries and her attempts to work within the system to address the illegal activities. Her testimony was instrumental in establishing new oversight protocols for military research and development programs. Dr. Saka Vasquez left naval service to lead a new international monitoring program designed to prevent similar environmental crimes in the future. Her expertise in marine acoustics became crucial in assessing and repairing the damage caused by the illegal testing. Chief Santos was promoted and assigned to a new position in naval intelligence, where her analytical skills and moral courage were recognized as exactly the qualities needed to prevent future cover-ups. The illegal testing program was completely dismantled, its participants prosecuted under both military and international law. The experimental weapons were destroyed, and the affected marine sanctuaries were placed under enhanced protection to allow for ecological recovery. Lieutenant Commander Burke returned to submarine service, but his career was forever changed by his decision to defy orders. While officially cleared of wrongdoing, he found himself both celebrated as a whistleblower hero and criticized as someone who had violated the fundamental military principle of following orders without question. Years later, when asked about his decision to risk everything to expose the illegal testing program, Burke would say that the choice had been surprisingly easy. He had sworn an oath to protect and defend, and sometimes that oath required defending the Constitution and the environment against those who would hide illegal activities behind the flag. The incident became a case study in military ethics and environmental law, demonstrating both the potential for institutional cover-up and the power of individual conscience to expose wrongdoing. Sarah's initial investigation, Jackson's crucial intelligence gathering, Burke's dramatic intervention, and the courage of others who chose truth over career advancement had combined to prevent environmental catastrophe and restore accountability to military operations. The marine sanctuary areas slowly recovered from the damage caused by the experimental weapons, their ecosystems gradually returning to normal function. The whales and dolphins that had fled the area during the testing eventually returned, their acoustic communications once again filling the ocean with the natural sounds that had been silenced by illegal human activities. The story became a reminder that sometimes the most important military victories are won not through the use of weapons, but through the courage to expose those who would misuse them for illegal purposes.